I didn't work on that, and I don't know. I have a deep knowledge of what are these.
Okay, so I think then, Jan, you can just go through it. We will be a little bit brief on the stuff which we think it's not necessary, but I think it's good to start with the FAIR guiding principles.
I totally agree with you. So I put together a few slides. So very short, and so Claudio, if you have questions, always do not hesitate to interrupt us.
Okay, thanks.
And what I'm going to skim through very quickly is going to be discussed in more details by Barbara. So basically, what are the FAIR principles? These are a set of guidelines for scientific data management and stewardship that were proposed in 2016 in a paper that was published in Scientific Data, which is a data journal from Nature. Basically, what it means, FAIR, it's the acronym meaning find that data should be findable, accessible, interpretable, and reusable, right? And that paper actually, at the time where it was published, actually gained a lot of traction and momentum in various international organizations like the European Commission, NIH, but it's even been discussed in the G8 and G20 between the ministers of research. And so what are they in practice is that FAIR principles are not made for human, but they are made in order to make data for machine first, right? And one of the reasons is that we humans are generating tons of data. And it is impossible for us to actually work with that data one after the other unless we have ways of organizing or making this data accessible to machines so that they can work for us. Sorry. And so basically the idea when you apply these FAIR principles is to transform data into machine actionable unit of information so that you can create clients that will work with that for you. So of course the human is part of FAIR, but it's not the main focus. And so basically there has been 15 principles that are dispatched through findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. But I'm not going to talk about that because Barbara is going to go into the details. And the reason for that session is actually because I am leading a task in OntoCommons, which aims at bringing FAIR principles to OntoCommons partners and industry. And so we are trying to do that with another task. We created what we call the knowledge exchange space, where we have regular meeting with projects and partners like Barbara and GoFair, which is the organization that actually promotes the FAIR principles. And the idea is actually to have this session as a training session to explain what are the methods and the different methodologies that are proposed by GoFair to actually implement the FAIR principles. So GoFair is an international organization. You can go on their website. There's tons of information there. And Barbara, basically, I know her for, that's already 8 years, Barbara, when we started to collaborate together in EUDAT. So Barbara is a semantic expert and a database engineer. She's been working for the Environment Agency in Austria. Initially, she's a landscape ecologist, coupled with a knowledge engineer, which is great mix of profile because she has the domain knowledge and the technical knowledge. She's the co-chair of the RDA working group I Adopt, and she co-developed the FAIR implementation profile approach and the metadata for machine workshop that actually she's going to talk about a little bit today. And now she's also working for the GoFair Foundation as the FAIR Development Coordinator. And now I keep my mouth shut because that's all for Barbara to continue. So if you have any questions, Claudio, do not hesitate.
No, it's okay. Thanks at this level.
So
I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah. Okay. Share screen.
A sort of private presentation just for me. Thank you.
But it's, I think, also good for Jan because he's also interested to know a little bit more in detail what we are doing.
Okay.
And I also want at the end discuss or present a new initiative that we started a few weeks ago, and where we want to invite collaboration. Okay, my focus will be about fair implementation profiles, which is one of a set of methodologies promoted by GoFair Foundation. And this work is done really together with Eric Schultes, who is the fair implementation lead of GoFair Foundation. So it's not only my work, right? So we will change a little bit the agenda, but I will introduce a little bit the 3-point verification framework of GoFair, and then dive into the fair implementation profiles approach. Present the concept behind, and then do a demo with a service that we developed, the FIP wizard. And you can always interrupt me because we are such a small group, so better that you interrupt me immediately than afterwards, because I want to give you the feeling that you can really follow this. There seems to be no. There's only Claudio, and thank you.
No, it's me.
Okay, good. First of all, it's important there are some similar names for the similar infrastructures or institutes. So there's GoFair, and GoFair is a bottom-up, stakeholder-driven and self-governed initiative that aims to implement the fair data principles. And in addition, there's GoFair Foundation. So what's the difference? So the GoFair Foundation was established in 2018 as a separate legal entity under Dutch law, in order also to support the FAIR principles, but really to become operational and do developments. Whereas the GoFair is a network of implementation or hosts implementation networks for different domains. So this is broader. We are focused. We are 5 experts, and I am part of the team since May only, but I have been developing together with Eric on all these methods already for 3 years. Mainly working for ENVI-FAIR, that's an environmental research infrastructure project, where I had the task to do fair assessment on the data and services used in the ENVI research infrastructures. So let's see, I have a bit of problem to go further. Oh, yeah. Now, we have defined different criteria to do GoFair Foundation qualification. So we look, we really analyze and compare methods, and then interpret and give also qualification on these methods using a set of criteria. One is that the FAIR principles, as they are described in this well-known paper in 2016, were not set in stone. So how you do the implementation was not described. It was just described which behavior is expected to comply with the FAIR principles from machines. So, but it was not explained how this can be implemented. So first of all, what we did, we started to interpret the FAIR guiding principles and wrote about them. So you see on the bottom our interpretations and implementation considerations. And we think that so our mission is to help to promote the Internet of fair data and services and we used a fair hourglass to explain this vision. And so the freedom of operate on the top and on the bottom of the hourglass are all the different ways you can create data and capture data and reuse it, and also all the different technologies to use these data. They are really, their freedom of operate, but in the middle there's a minimal standard in the center that will allow to produce fair ready data. And this will be similar and comparable with the distributed architecture of the internet and its corresponding IEEE standards and TCP, IP, and HTTP protocols. And in the middle, in the center of the hourglass, we think that the specification for the fair digital object will actually help to make this vision true, because the FDO will bind all critical information about an entity in one place, and then create a new kind of operational, actionable, and meaningful technology-independent object that can be applied to every aspect of the digital space. So it is the technical essence of a thing in cyberspace. So this is our vision. You can have lots of different approaches to make a verification of your data, so to provide this verification, but at the center you have one specification how this can be done, so that at the end you can make use of fair data with different services. Other criteria are openness. So we think data should be as open as possible, but as restricted as necessary, as many data from the health domain should not be open to everybody because it's personal data. But we believe also that the services should be as distributed as possible and as centralized as necessary. And we really want to avoid provider lock-in. So we are not promoting specific implementations, but we show implementations that work, and there are for sure different other ones that are delivering what we need. So we are open for any solution that can help to implement fair approaches. There's another criteria we want to promote: data visiting for all the data which has personal information included, like health data. So the difference between data sharing and data visiting is that for the visiting, data stays local, the analysis happens only locally, but the access is provided and is known. Yeah. Whereas data sharing would be copy and transport of data, and analysis happens elsewhere, and you have no control over the data anymore. This might be okay for many domains. For the health data, this will not work. And openness also means goes beyond fair. Fair doesn't mean that your data must be open, but we think that it wherever it is possible to make your data open, do it. Where it is not, then try other solutions like data visiting. We have developed a 3-point verification framework. You can see there are 3 main elements: the metadata for machines, the fair implementation profile, and the fair data point. You can, if you click on that link, find the whole description of all these components, how this is built. But mainly metadata for machine workshops are 1 or 2 days events with domain experts that bring in domain relevant knowledge, and also their community standards. With fair metadata experts, mainly Eric and me and others that we are training, we have some solutions and tools that we can show, and together we can build fair metadata using fair vocabularies, and also training on the reuse of existing resources. So we have actually now already 22 different events with different domains, not only health, but environmental sciences, climate, and so on. So you can have, there's a link here. And when you go to that link, you will see that some of the sessions are recorded. So everything is also documented here. In addition, we have developed this concept of fair implementation profiles, which declare the use of fair enabling resources. And yeah, this is the topic of today, so I will go into this into more detail afterwards. And then we also promote, or we can show, not today, but how fair data points work. That is a pre-solution which will be, I'm sure, in a few months be substituted by fair data, fair data points, fair digital objects. And the fair digital object is a specification that is under development and will be presented by end of October. So in future we will have this solution, but the fair data point is already working and it has 3 components. There's a spec based on semantic metadata and REST, and the service with an authentication system and front end, which allows users to edit their metadata and to validate that with Shackle. Now, diving into the topic fair implementation profiles, what is this? This is, there's a clear definition of it. We mean by that a list of declared technology choices intended to implement each of the FAIR principles. And these choices are made by a collective, and this collective is called a FAIR implementation community. So it's a community of practice. So people interested to jointly create fair data and services. This can be part of an infrastructure or of a project, or also people using the same registry or repository of data and metadata. So the FIPS are this list of these choices of fair enabling resources made by a fair implementation community. We describe this approach in this paper, and there will be new publications soon about this, and everything is based on the FAIR guiding principles. To formalize this approach, we developed an ontology, quite simple ontology, explaining how these different components relate to each other. So we have a fair implementation community, as explained before, and the technology choices are called fair enabling resources. And what we aim for are to get a list of FIP declarations. So a declaration by a community to use fair enabling resources. And these are related to questions, FIP questions that are related themselves to each of the FAIR guiding principles. Sorry.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Then the idea is to have the possibility to have different communities that have done different choices, and then to represent the different communities and the choices they have made, or to have a sort of agreement between a large community on one specific implementation?
Yeah, you are hitting the point. So we aim for fair convergence, right? But to aim for fair convergence, you have first to find out what you are already using, which technologies you are using in your infrastructure. And so you could have two different FIPS, one stating what you are using right now, and the second one to be, where you try to converge with another community and find ways to agree on common resources.
Then the idea of developing this ontology for the implementation profile is to, let's say, collect what are the implementation profiles that exist, and try to understand what are the differences, and try to see if it is possible to converge to.
In fact. So first you have to really be clear what and declare or describe clearly what you are using before you can really find out how you can converge, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and also I think our first idea was to raise awareness, because people are not so sure what fair technologies are or how they can be implemented. So the first idea is also to teach people how fair getting principles can be implemented, make them aware, and then together with them build this implementation profiles, and then see how they can converge. But I will come here with different examples. With each FIP declaration, we allow us a consideration. So these are human readable text. So your considerations about requirements and the constraints you have in your infrastructure, implement or using a specific fair enabling resource. What we also did by request, because I was working, or I'm still working for the NREFAIR community. The NREFAIR is a project to really implement FAIR, but they started 2019 and they had not always fair technology choices at hand. So they are at the moment developing approaches, right? And therefore it was needed for them to have also other statements about the choice of these technologies. They wanted to have included the planned use of a resource, and also they want to declare what they use now and what they plan and how they plan to replace it in future with which other resource. So this makes it a little bit more flexible. You could also say more fussy, but I think it's really important that we, in these years where everything is under development, this should also be captured. We do this by using a tool called FIP Wizard. The FIP Wizard is based on a data stewardship wizard for data management plans, and we have a custom for creating the fair implementation profiles. The wizard has the capability to express these choices in different ways. So you can have as outputs human readable documents like Word or PDF, but you can also express this as RDF, as triples, statements about your choices. And we opted to use nano publications. So for each of these declarations, you get out a nano publication, which is a RDF, a specific RDF format, where you have the assertion included about the declarations, or that the community uses a fair naming resource. You have also the provenance information included, and the publication information. Yeah, here you see like how nano publication can looks like. In the blue part, you see the assertion, a triple about saying here in this case that C.NET CDI is a fair implementation community. You can describe this. It has a preferred label. It links to a website, and here it defines also which research domains are covered by this community. And here you see a fair naming resource, the C.NET CDI metadata XML schema that they use. Also in the middle part is the assertion. And the red part, you see the provenance information with the ORCID of the data set. Yeah, and in the yellow part, you see when this has been created. Everything about nano publications and the NanoBench tool can be, you find here more information here in the using this link. Behind this technology is one colleague of ours who worked very a long time together with us to produce this. So he's Tobias Kuhn, and he has produced this tutorials to understand better the technology. The fair labeling resources come with the definition of different types. So for each of the FAIR principles, we have identified types. For F1, for example, identifier service, and we define this, we have added also a definition here that should help to understand what is meant by that. I will go into this in more detail later. Just to make it a bit more understandable, we always talk about 15 FAIR principles, fair guiding principles. 2 of the fair guiding principles, so A1 and R1, are split into 2 more specific principles, and we have here just touched the more specific ones. So we don't speak about A1, but A11 and A12. Therefore, we have less principles mentioned here. And the last one, the R13, is about community standards. And community standards are covered by this FAIR implementation profile. This is our interpretation, because we are gathering a community so that they decide together about the community standards they are using. So the whole FIP is giving an answer to this principle. Going through the different principles, F1 requires identifier services, which is a service that provides for any digital object algorithms guaranteeing global uniqueness, policy document that guarantees persistent and resolution of the identifier to machine actionable metadata describing the object and its location. Specific implementations are the UI, the Pearls, also many others, decentralized identifiers. The second principle is about metadata schema. So a metadata schema is defined here as a specification that defines metadata fields describing attributes of data or other digital objects. Yeah, there are tons of metadata schemas out there that can be used, like DCAT, but you can also build your own community-specific metadata standard used by your community, metadata schema, I would say, and you can use CEDA for that, where you can, but there are also other tools where you can really define each of the metadata elements. And then F3 is about linking metadata to data. and for that we also need a schema specification that provides a unique, persistent, ideally bi-directional machine actionable link between metadata and the data they describe. F4 is a registry service that indexes metadata and data and provides search over that index. So there are many repositories that are community specific, like CDataNet, HealthRI. But for example, also fair sharing is a registry, or for BioPortal is a registry for vocabularies. Then the A principles are about accessibility. So, and they require communication protocols, a specification that defines how messages are structured and exchanged. And they also address the need for authorization authentication service if the data is not openly available for everybody. Sometimes you have just open access and you don't need that. But if you want to regulate this, you need to specify which service you are using. And A12 is addressing the necessity that metadata should be preserved even when data is no more accessible or no more existing. You should have the metadata about it. So the policy how to preserve the metadata should be known and also accessible. This is a great problem because these are normally PDF documents that are somewhere hidden and not accessible by machines. We have provided a solution for that. There might be others in future. I1 is about the interoperability and how data and metadata can be organized or created in an interoperable way. So first of all, we need to specify the language used for representing data. These should be made processable by machines. So RDF, XML are good candidates. We have I2 for structured vocabularies. So I2 requests that vocabulary should that metadata uses vocabularies for their entries, and these vocabularies must be fair as well. So we need a specification of uniquely identified and unambiguous concepts with their definitions represented using web standards. And I3 requires semantic models. There are specifications that define qualified relations between entities describing data or other digital objects using structured and fair vocabularies. So it's schema plus vocabulary. And R11 addresses the need to define under which conditions you can use data. So a usage license should be accessible to describe how you can use this data. R12 is about a provenance model. So if you use a specification that defines metadata fields to describe the origin and the lineage of data and other digital objects, mostly prof or variants of prof, the provenance model is used for that, but also some specific other or parts of other metadata schemas can be used for that. And as I said, the FIP as a whole is interpreted to cover the principle R13.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Can you say something more about the distinction between what is a metadata schema and a semantic model? Because I'm a bit puzzled about that.
Yeah, metadata schema defines the different elements that are needed to describe data set. Yeah. So there are the questions more or less. Yeah. Whereas vocabularies are used to answer these questions, and so you can see this when I will open the FIP Wizard, and you can see how this is implemented. For example, CEDAR allows to specify each of the elements, and you can then reuse vocabularies, for example, from BioPortal, to provide the answers for these questions, for these elements. So they must be machine readable as well. Yeah.
May I jump in? I mean, there is indeed a confusion between the metadata schema, because the ontologies can be used to answer or to represent in a uniform way the content, but it can also be used to represent uniformly with an ontology the metadata field himself.
Yeah.
Right. So
yes,
it's true that the metadata schema can also be an ontology. It doesn't have to be, because if you look at many different scientific communities or even other communities, they are not necessarily mature enough to have ontologies, but they have, well, XML schemas that exist, for instance, right? And so in that case, indeed, there's no ontology, but, so you can still be fair without having ontologies, although the fact that it says that you need to use a vocabulary for the interoperability one is a tricky one. So, but yeah, in many cases, the metadata schema can also be the ontology. If you take DCAT is an ontology, right?
Yeah, but
and it's a data model.
Yeah, it is an ontology, but it doesn't specify always which vocabulary you should use for your answers. Yeah, you can use also different answers from different vocabulary. So there's also freedom to operate. But if you can see here, these are domain relevant community standards. Yeah, the blue ones here. So metadata, there's F2 metadata schema, I2 structured vocabulary, fair vocabulary, and I3 semantic model. The semantic model brings it together. So the semantic model is a conceptual model which defines the structure, but it also for I3 you have also to provide the answers or the instances in a with fair vocabularies. The metadata schema can or cannot be ontologies, but for I3 we need conceptual models that are at the end also ontologies.
It seems to me that I'm not an expert at all. Then probably I don't want to say that this is the truth. But in my reading of a definition, let's say, of a metadata schema, when I read a metadata field describing attributes of data, for me, then what is a field? What is how can you define a field without any vocabulary? I mean,
you can, because there are many metadata schemas that are just PDF documents, right? They say you need this and this, but you're not specifying.
Then it is just a technical, let's say. In one case, for example, I use a language like semantic web language, something like that for semantic model, while here I can just use natural language, something like that.
Yeah, you can, but it will not help you a lot, because you have then to actually implement this metadata schema. You have to make it fair in that sense. You refer to that. Inspire, for example, you can just.
Then when I try to implement, then I need to have a vocabulary written in some language. Then I don't see in any more a strong difference between these two.
Could be. Yeah, we can discuss along on this, but you can have a metadata schema that is generally recognized, but you make it so you rely on that, but you make it more specific and implement it in I3. Yeah. So it's important that you have also this common agreement on metadata schemas that also others know, and you make it then more specific for your community using fair vocabularies. Okay. So we had to define which metadata schemas and preservation policies, all these blue principles in metadata for machine workshops. And whereas the red are about the technical infrastructure are mostly defined by the authority of the community. So these are given by the necessity and requirements of that. And as said, the fair implement or the fair principles are made first for machines, but this must also be understood by humans, and this is done for you humans. So you can also read this as just a table at the end, this list. And this is for machines, so you have these statements expressed as a nano publication index, which is a list of nano publications for each choice. We have this done for 25 communities in 2020 at the CoData Convergence Symposium in 6 different workshops. And we then at the end, so we collected this information. So these you see here, this comparison table that was needed to then drive convergence. And we do this also with an NV Fair, trying to identify the used resources over the years, and how this evolves. And if you look into this, you see here the different resources, and each link gives you access to the nano publication. And to come to a convergence, you create this comparison table, which is called the FIB matrix. You can then discuss about the red and the blue principles, how they differ, and try to find convergence by reuse or optimization. And this has already been done within different communities. For example, in the health domain, we worked in the Vodam project and defined their profile. This was then taken up by HealthRI and adapted for their needs. TWOC was another project that added a few other fair enabling resources, and then an additional project was Incentive, which is also about viruses, but about influenza and not the coronavirus. So you see here how this can be used. You can reuse existing FIBs or adapt it for your use, for your need, or you use different enabling resources from such as FIB. And you can then also take the results because everything is stored in a triple store, and you can then make graphs and then analyze it from different perspectives, so community-centric, or also from the other side, you look into the resources which are used by others. So here you see the resource overlap between different communities, between domains and across domains. Here you have it resource-centric, so which resource is used, or which communities are using the same resource. And convergence can happen via just using the same resource, but also making the resource more fair, so more interoperable, trying to establish mappings between the resources used. And all this is now being used by World Fair, a project driven by CoData, which has 12 different domains. It's an international project. And in these different domains, they use they describe their fair implementation profiles, and then they sit together and really try to drive to go towards convergence within their domain, but also across where it is possible. And I just want to mention that we are also doing qualifications of fair enabling resources. We are checking if these fair enabling resources comply to the FAIR principles based on our criteria. You see here a list of projects and initiatives using FIPS. It's quite long, it's growing. And we also use the FIPS at the end to analyze what of these resources should also be included in the data management plan, because there's quite an overlap to the data management plan, and we are developing now the tool in such a way that it's just a button to suggest possible implementations in your data management plan. Yeah, and at the end, I also want to say that we are going to present the results of NREFAIR, the results of our latest developments in the FIPS at the Hot Zone Week on FAIR in Leiden, which is between 26 and 28 October. And so there's the FAIR Convergence Symposium first. Then from 28, I'm not sure, I think it's from 24 to 28, yeah. And the last part of the week is about the FAIR Digital Object Conference, where we will present the FIP as important metadata to inform the FAIR Digital Object. Yeah, and at the end, I also want to say that the FAIR Connect is a new initiative, which will be a platform for promoting the use of fair enabling resources. It will be a platform for presenting these fair enabling resources in a fair way, because for each of the fairs we will have a nano publication, but also an article with a maximum of 10,000 characters to describe the use and the benefit or also the difficulties to implement and use that in the communities. This should be enter point for everybody who wants to present new approaches and to learn from others what is being used. And we will launch this, or we will present the first draft of this FAIR Connect, which is an initiative promoted by iOS Press and Go FAIR Foundation in this conference. Yeah, so now it's 1, and I had no time really to present this, to do a real demo. The question is if we can have a bit more time so I can go into that part.
I think you can have a bit more time. I see no issue with that, unless so there's Claudio.
No, I can. It's okay for me.
And Mikel, if you want to stay and have a demo of the FIP wizard.
Yeah, because then you can a little bit understand what we discussed before. What's the difference, between a schema and vocabularies, and if these are if this isn't the same somehow, right? So this is the FIP wizard. I don't know if you see it.
We do see it. It's small though.
It's a little bit small. But...
Yeah. Can you increase the size
really
of the?
Increase that, because I'm using the whole. Yeah. I don't know how I can make it better visible, because I cannot.
You're already full screen, so I see.
So I'm just explaining it a little bit how it works. A FIP is a fair implementation is a fair implementation profile, and in the wizard it's a project. So if you go to projects, you will see here many existing projects. If you clear the selection when you enter, everything is customized for you. Yeah, so you have to clear the selection so that you see all the FIPS done by others. You can also search for specifically for FIPS, because you could see here also other types like fair enabling resources, which are also projects here. So how does projects look like? For example, if you go to CDataNet, that is a FIP about the marine community, where you see that there are different chapters for the questionnaire that we have built here. The questionnaire chapters, the first one is only giving background information. The second chapter is defining the fair implementation community and the data steward who is entering the information. And the chapters 3 to 6 are dedicated to the main principles: findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. And in each of these, it goes down to the sub-principles. And the last chapter is about giving you the possibility to mint your fair enabling resources as nano publications. It's very easy how it is built up and has always the same pattern. You get information about findability and the sub-principles, and also the fair enabling resources that are requested to choose. So if you have no metadata, no declaration for F1 related to metadata, you should then click that there is nothing yet decided by the community. But if you have one, then you click on that, and then you can choose your fair enabling resource. And you have also to say if this is in use, or is currently in use, or is planned to be used. I don't want to change this one, so I'm creating a new FIP, a test FIP, using a template for getting a fair implementation profile. I can choose now the fair implementation community if I have defined or minted a community as a nano publication. But let's say I'm doing this for ELTER. ELTER is a long-term ecosystem research infrastructure. I choose this, and I can click on this. This is a nano publication. When I click on this, I see the description of this community. So this is already a fair digital object in form of a nano publication. So the question here is an element, a metadata element, that requires an answer that is also fair. In this, here we are using nano publications, but I could also use a term from a vocabulary as an answer. Yeah, and so going to findability, I would then have to choose a fair enabling resource for F1, and for many of the principles, the question are directed for metadata and data. Some of them require only one answer. But for F1, we are asking what globally unique persistent resolvable identifier service do you use for metadata records? And the same question is then for data sets. So if I click on no implementation, then it's done. If I have one implementation, then I can choose a fair enabling resource in the drop-down list. I can, decide which I'm using, the digital object identifier, for example. And then I can say that this is in use or it will be used in future. And then I can add implementation considerations as text, as free text. Yeah.
And then the list of possible choices is closed, basically, and I cannot not add a new, a different way of implementing this specific kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can increase this pool. We have now 180 different, or almost 200 fair enabling resources, but you can increase this by going to this chapter 7, and then you can create your fair enabling resource using a template, which is essentially another project, and you can define which fair enabling resource you use.
Okay.
Here you put in the ORCID, and then you describe it here, and you get out a nano publication that can be immediately used in your project for the fair implementation profile.
Then if I'm using, for example, an implementation developed inside the project itself, and then I can add it, basically.
Yeah, so once you have it, defined it here, and you have published it, so you have to publish that as a nano publication in RDF, then, so I give you some ideas how this looks like. Then
how are you sure that there are not duplication, for example?
Well, that's why we have this as drop downs. First you choose. If you don't find it, you publish it. But you're right, there's a danger of duplication. What we create here are metadata, information about the resource. But in essence, we are also creating a digital representation of that resource. So, for example, Darwin Core Standard exists somewhere, but if I click on that, I see that it always links to something, to a website, right? But the website itself is not a resource. So we have to create something that is digital, a digital object, really describing the service or the schema.
Barbara, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I mean, some of these resources, are they coming from existing repositories like Fair Sharing?
Yeah. So everything so I am collaborating with Fair Sharing.
Okay.
And we have so at the beginning I wanted to use Fair Sharing resources directly, but there was some problem with the implementation, and also Fair Sharing has not all the fair enabling resources we would need.
Sure.
So there is some overlap, but not complete. And we make sure that everything what we use here is also referenced, or gives a reference to Fair Sharing, and also from the other side. So we are increasing now the pool. The next steps is looking what is in Fair Sharing, and what can be then produced as a nano publication here to be used in the FIP. Okay. But the way we did it was different. So we asked people to define what they are using. So what you see here in the pool is what people are using. So there might be many more, but depends really on the community what they use, right? So that's what.
Yeah. So I don't know, Claudio and Mika, if you know Fair Sharing. It's a registry of resources that are helping you with FAIR, that includes ontology, for instance. And we had recently a meeting within OntoCommons because we, at the time of the writing of the grant or the proper project, we decided that some of the resources that are going to be generated in OntoCommons should be published in Fair Sharing. So that's why I was asking the question, is like, if we do things in OntoCommons that are related to industry, and if we actually publish some standards there, will they be used? Will we be able to use them in the FIP? So we avoid duplication, actually.
Well, you need a way how to represent this, right? In the FIP. And the choice was to use nano publications because you cannot really include them directly in the FIP result.
I see that there is a question from Mikkel. I don't know if we answered. Is decentralized auto-generated ideas, so GU ideas, for IDs fair? Maybe Mikael, you can actually speak. I think you're a speaker, so hey.
I don't know. I was invited, so somehow I appeared on stage. So hello.
We put you in the light.
But it's an honor. I'm really great. No, we are working on making ontologies for industry for our global business,
Mm-hmm.
and because we needed to have a system that could also work without connectivity, we opted for auto-generated IDs that statistically will be unique with a very, very high probability. Because then we don't have one point of failure in a sort of an ID server. But I don't know how it fits into this.
So the question is if they are fair. So if you go back to identifier services that are fair, they should, first of all, they should be unique, right? But you should also have a policy document that guarantees persistence, so that this is working also in 10 years or not only now. And there should be a resolution that is also machine actionable. Between the data.
And the only problem is, so we also have all of those, except it's not 100% uniqueness. I cannot state that because it is statistically, it's a roll of a lot of dices, and then you have an ID. So that's just in my mind. I don't know. I'm sort of almost fair.
Yeah, we are always on that road map, right? There is nothing really perfect. We try to achieve a high fair level, but probably there are other better solutions. So Jan, can you say something?
Well, I think for IDs, there's no ideal solution. Even handles are, well, they are unique because the statistics says that the chance of having a duplicate is very low.
Yeah.
But yes, even handles and DOIs and things like that, they may not be unique. So globally unique GUID system is a globally unique system, right? So of course, what you need to implement if you really want to be fair would be a system that actually makes sure there's never a duplicate, so that you actually double check that when you generate an ID, then that ID does not exist anywhere. But yeah, that adds some constraints, but none of the unique identification systems are perfect.
No, none of them. So
no, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, for ontologies, one thing that, ontologies are unfortunately or fortunately web-based entities, right? So, and there are systems like W3ID or PURL that would allow you to guarantee some sort of uniqueness. But indeed, if you have the issues of connectivity, well, these are things that are on the web, so you need to resolve them, and you need to have access to the Perl server, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, that's an interesting question, Mikael.
So let me just finish showing you when you complete when you have completed the questionnaire, right? You can then publish it as a document, and you can then choose if this is machine readable, RDF, or it is human readable as PDF, and you can have different outputs. But at the end, we need it in RDF. You can then create it and publish it. I'm not doing it again, but because we have already published it. And then you can look at the submission, and you will see that this is nanopub index. So it's not one nano publication, is a list of nano publication. And you can then get it as a trick, and then you have why don't I see it directly? I can get it here. Yeah, then you have the nano publication here for each of the declarations. And why do we need it? Because everything is then collected in a triple store. You can query over everything. And then you can eventually build your metrics where you see the use of fair neighboring resources by community, and also how this is used in future or now and so on. And then this is a good basis to compare, because you see then the fingerprint for each community and see how this changes over time. And this raises a lot of discussions, a lot of possible opportunities to converge, to harmonize the approaches. I think it's a good tool to raise awareness about this, about the choices that different communities use, right? And
it's a great tool to have that as a workshop, because, well, basically you sit at the table and you start discussing how you can get organized in your own community, right? So it helps a lot.
Yeah, I think it's a good starting point. It's the start of a journey. Yeah, it's not the final.
But the same goes for metadata for machine, right? I mean, metadata is always the problem in communities, right?
Yeah, and this works together, right? So as I said here, some of these fair naming resources can be defined in these metadata for machine workshops. But many other decisions are taken somewhere else, right? Depending on the systems you are using. Yeah. So what I also want to say, this Fair Connect platform will be a platform where you can see all the FAIR implementation profiles, because at the moment it's a bit local, right? So we don't have a service, but this will come. So the Fair Connect will be a portal where you can see all the profiles, you see all the fair neighboring resources, you can discuss about the quality of the fair neighboring resources. You can make a wheel out of it. A wheel means that communities sit together and discuss about the use of a fair neighboring resource, and if there's a great commitment to use it, then it gets a wheel, which means many are using it. Might be a good choice. Yeah. So if you are interested to get more information about Fair Connect and also to get involved into this initiative, because many are already doing, let me know. I can invite you and give you more details.
Thanks, Barbara. I'm actually in.
You are in, so you are interested, or?
I received the invite and I put my contact info.
Perfect. So. Perfect. So
I do the best I can.
Yeah. So Eric did. Yeah. Perfect.
Claudio, Michael, do you have any? Then you as well. Do you have any questions on FAIR?
No, I just have a quick comment. So we've been working in Grundfos, my company, with FAIR for many years, and I attended one of the Go FAIR meetings in Finland some years ago, I think. And I just know that sometimes data stakeholders in Grundfos have a difficulty seeing the difference between fair and quality. So sometimes we have to put a fair Q. So we say fair and quality, and we just try to solve everything to at least take one step in the right direction for a project. And then that's maybe just the voice from the dark side of industry. But that's what we're working with.
That's interesting. So we had a session 2 days ago on fair semantics, so making ontology fair, and we had exactly the same comment from someone else that says that often fair is linked to quality. And so we discussed that. Indeed, fair does not put any constraints on the quality of the data itself. However, it's a guarantee of quality of the description of the metadata of the data, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't look at whether or not this number is right or wrong, but it gives you, I mean, it's sort of a quality stamp that says if you're fair, it means that at least you're well documented and interoperable and reusable as such.
Yeah.
But yes, indeed. And the same goes for fair and openness, which is always a problem for industry. I mean, fair doesn't mean open at all.
Yeah.
So it's just fair. And then you can use it in open context, which is great. But open can be open in a large company, for instance, right? Like trying to exchange information between the different business units is the way to keep it open. And there, FAIR is going to be extremely useful.
So, and I think what GoFair tries, and I think what you have been in such an event already, but a few years ago. In the meantime, we have made some progress, I think, and we try. So we are completely aware that making data fair is quite a complex process, right? But we try to make this process a little bit easier, having developed these events where you approach it from different angles, step by step. You can get fairer and fairer because it makes really a difference. If your data is fair, you will save time and money afterwards, because we always just trying to combine data because nothing is explicitly stated about this data so far, very often.
Yeah. And I really like that you had APIs also in some of it, because I think from my point of view, that's a key also to making data actually be used. That the developers who needs to consume data, they have a API information as part of this solution.
Yeah. So we distinguish between fair neighboring resources, which are those types that are used to fill out the FIP questionnaire. And in addition, there are fair supporting resources like services, APIs, and so on, that go beyond that use, but are important for supporting these approaches.
Yeah, like the fair data point.
Yeah, but also like data management plans. Data management plans which are addressing the fair aspects, they are also supporting resources, right? Yeah, so thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Barbara, for this great presentation. If you have no other comments, Michael and Claudio, maybe we can stop here.
I have just a curiosity, but
yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
Then, according to your data, there is a convergence among people implementing FAIR principle, or there are really different communities?
There are lots of different approaches, and in some domains they are closer. So in the marine domain, we have detected quite a high convergence. In others, they're quite disparate, but I think the World Fair project, which is an international one, will make a lot of progress towards convergence. They are sitting together and they try to really find common solutions, right, and decide on this.
Is it important to have a convergence in this case or not?
Yeah, it is important because otherwise we are in our silos and we cannot really do good research because we need this broader view on the complex problems that we have to solve.
In particular, if you want to reuse data collected by other communities in this case, imagine.
Yeah, and it's a problem also of interoperability. So if everybody comes with its own solution and without taking into account the solutions from other, there will be issues when you try to reuse because there is interoperability issues.
Yes.
Yeah. Also, you can spare time developing something from scratch. You first check if there's something already available and which is doing your job, and then probably just customize it for you. But keep the interoperability.
No, I understand. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I just have one question. Did you ever hear about the GRASP framework from Holland? It's a guy called Piek Wossen who has made it might seem unrelated, but I think it's really related to these, what did you call these small packages with assertion and provenance and.
I will read it, right? I have now the link. Thank you. I didn't hear about it, must say.
But basically, yeah, I will not use much time, but the idea is he worked with information in kind of the same structure, and then he reasoned so that you can find out if different packages are in conflict. Are they stating the same or not stating the same?
Yeah.
So it's just a really it struck me as a really nice sort of overlap that could be really interesting.
Yeah, it could also help for identifying the fairness level somehow, if the things are supporting each other or not, or the different parts are interoperable or not. I will
It's
read
probably
it.
a long shot, but check it out. It's really cool.
Yeah, thank you very much for that.
Thanks for sharing, Mikael.
Okay. Then thank you for your interest, and it was a pleasure to be here, although we were a small group, but it was very interactive at the end.
Thank you.
The size does not matter, right?
No.
As long as we could exchange, and it was nice
Yeah.
to have you, Barbara, and thanks for your time. I
Yeah.
really appreciate that you accepted to come to that training session. I will continue pushing for having more of these FIP sessions organized in Onto Commons, because I think that's going to be helpful for the community there.
Yeah, so I tried to give you some idea, but sometimes you need to know a little bit more, and also while creating this, there are lots of discussion, which we can really guide and help. Okay.
Okay, and thank you, Claudio and Mikael, for joining. It was a pleasure having you.
No, thanks.
And thanks for all the questions and discussions.
Many thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
So have a nice lunch.
Okay.
I think it's lunchtime now.
Yeah.
And if you have any questions, you can find our contact information. So please do not hesitate to get in touch.
I have also here, I put the link to my presentation. You can download it there. You find here all the other links, and you can also contact me.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Same to you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So thank you. Should I end the session now?
Yes.
I think you can. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bon appétit.
Thank
Merci.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.